Welcome to today's Global Connections program. I'm Bill Miller. What exactly is human trafficking? How prevalent is human trafficking, and what can be done to reduce it? We'll be back in just a moment to talk about these and other important issues. You're watching Global Connections Television, which is a privately funded, independently produced program. The opinions expressed on Global Connections are solely those of the moderator and his guest. We would invite our viewers to go to our website at www.globalconnectionstelevision.com to take a look at some of the previous programs. Also, if you're involved with any type of media outlet, be it a PBS, community access television station, perhaps a website, a university, intra-campus television station, or whatever it might be, and have an interest in these international topics, please feel free to download them and to air them free of charge at no cost. Global Connections Television is provided as a public service to help people better understand international issues and how they impact people from Frankfort, Kentucky to Frankfurt, Germany, and from Lima, Ohio to Lima, Peru. Today we're going to take a look at human trafficking. This is a major problem, and we're starting to hear more and more about it as we go along. My guest today is an expert on this particular topic. My guest today is Racha Haffar. Racha Haffar currently is a Fulbright scholar teaching at the University of Kentucky in Lexington, Kentucky, USA. Racha is a Tunisian journalist and a women's rights advocate who obtained her double master's degree in international relations and international development from the University of Tunis and Palermo. Racha Haffar, welcome to today's Global Connections program.
Thank you.
I appreciate you being with me today.
Thank you, Bill.
We're going to get into human trafficking in just a moment, but let's talk a little bit about the Arab Spring. I did not realize this, but as we were talking, you said I think you were about 20, 22, you were involved in the Arab Spring in the birthplace of it in Tunisia. You're from Tunisia. What exactly, for our viewers, briefly, what is the Arab Spring and what were the conditions that led up to this really people's movement, and how important was that?
So it's people were fed up with the regime. They were fed up with the oppression and the dictatorship for so long. So we just needed to express our voices and finally say it's enough. That's what happened. So we just went into the streets and we said enough.
Exactly. And now, as I recall, that was in 2010, I believe. Is that correct?
The revolution.
The revolution.
So the uprising started 17th of December 2010. Mohammed al-Bouazizi immunited himself, the street vendor. And from there, the protests started moving to the capital, where we had the mass mobilization, where people were all in the street calling for the dictator to leave.
Exactly. A lot of people believe, people who've watched that area of the world, believe that the Arab Spring was really sort of the launching pad. They created sort of a domino effect for other popular uprisings in Libya, in Syria, and countries like that. Is that how it's perceived in your area of the world?
Yeah, I believe it was a domino effect, and people realized that they actually have power. So when they saw that Tunisians took over power for their lives, for their own lives, to decide their own future, I think people got more brave and they got inspired. However, things didn't turn out the same way as in Tunisia for the other Arab countries.
Yeah, Tunisia has been really, outside of a few isolated terrorist attacks, has really been a very stable country in comparison to Syria or Libya or Iraq or some country like that.
Yes. Because we're more of a harmonious society, so we don't have a lot of differences. And recently we won the Nobel Peace Prize.
The Nobel Peace Prize.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you. I think we have to congratulate the Tunisian civil society activists and who are working really hard in creating a link between the people and the government so that we don't have further problems.
And there will probably be other Arab Springs in other countries as time goes along. And
I always hope that people will always revolt against dictators, because you only live one life, and it's not supposed to be lived in silence and in oppression and without dignity.
Exactly,
Yeah.
that's very true. Yes. Well, we're going to talk about human trafficking, and let's just start off. Now, you have done a paper on it. You've studied it. You're an expert in this area. But let's start off with a very basic question. When we're talking about human trafficking, what is there a broad definition that would apply to that term?
So, human trafficking is basically any type of coercion or abuse or force a person or a network, more than one person, uses against other people or one person to put them in situations where this person cannot say no. So it includes sex trafficking, it includes labor trafficking, servitude, serfdom, slavery, practices similar to slavery. So it varies from the spectrum, from directly being trafficked across borders in huge, like a big network using you in sex and prostitution. Or it can actually be in your own hometown where you work in someone's house, and then they use their power, threaten you or make you scared, where you just feel obliged to just adhere to their power and work in conditions that you don't approve. So that can also be working extra hours without payment, or getting paid less than you agreed upon, or having your passport confiscated, or your documents, or finding yourself helpless.
That's something I think probably when many people think of human trafficking, they're probably thinking of women who are transported across international lines or state borders and forced to go into prostitution or whatever the case might be. But you bring up an interesting point in that many people are domestic help. They work for somebody. They were brought, say, from the Philippines to the United States or to Qatar or wherever it might be, and then they're held basically as prisoners in their houses, and their passports are taken away, and they have no rights whatsoever in that house.
Yeah, I believe there's a huge misconception when it comes to human trafficking. People's always, everyone gets really striked when you ask them, what do you know about human trafficking? First of all, they ask you, does it really exist? Is it really happening here? I don't really know about it. So people don't know what it means. They don't know that it is not necessarily only sex trafficking. It's not only women held in prostitution, because children are also involved. But it can be any way of being forced to do anything that you're not able of saying no. So it can be also your family members, it can be your parents, anyone who uses their power to abuse another person.
Is it safe to say that human trafficking probably exists in every country of the world? Now, to differing degrees, obviously,
it is
in different
everywhere.
situations, but
yes.
Every country has this problem.
Yes, if the country is not an exporter of trafficked victims, it's a place where it receives these victims. So there's a difference, between, let's say, Asian and African countries who have the biggest number of exported victims because of, poverty and unemployment and social, the social situations. And then there's the European or the West countries, the rich ones, where these networks transport the victims to in order to use them in the industry, whether it's sex or labor or of course, it's all for profit.
Exactly. Now, some people, I think probably, I'm guessing at this, have the erroneous impression that not all prostitutes, but anybody who's in prostitution who came from another area are trafficked, but not all prostitutes are involved in human trafficking, are they?
Exactly.
Maybe some human traffickers are involved in prostitution, but it doesn't work the other way, does it?
Exactly, yeah. So not all women who work in prostitution are trafficked. Some of them, of course, used to. They choose to. But basically, everyone who's trafficked can be used in anything. So
there are a lot of non-governmental organizations, faith-based groups that are working against this condition. The United Nations system, I know for a fact, I've had people on the program from the United Nations International Labor Organization that have flagged this as one of the major problems. The UN Children's Fund, UNICEF, they're dealing with this in many cases. The workers, the frontline workers are dealing with it. The UN High Commission for Refugees, the UN High Commission for Human Rights, and the main one, I guess, is the Office for Drugs and Crime, the ODC of the UN. What are they doing to help overcome this problem, to help these people who are caught in this vicious cycle or vicious web of human trafficking?
So basically, they have established the Convention against Transnational Organized Crime, and then the Palermo Protocol of 2000 is the main protocol, the international instrument now that abides countries to comply with fighting human trafficking and meet the international standards of fighting human trafficking. So besides that, you know, forming the laws, they also keep track of the countries. So every country has to make a report, an annual report of human trafficking, of their efforts, national efforts in fighting it, and what do they do, and give statistics, and then report it to the UNODC, and then the United Nations will oversee what these countries are doing. And there's a measurement to measure these countries. They fall in which category. If you fight the human trafficking and you put all the efforts that you can do, so you would be a tier 1. However, the countries that fall behind and cannot comply with these international laws, and they would be in tier 2 and then tier 3. So Tunisia has signed and ratified the Palermo Protocol in 2003. However, since 2007, the national bill of law that has to fight human trafficking has been created, but it hasn't been promulgated through the parliament. So Tunisia has been falling behind even the other neighboring Arab countries. So it's actually at the same level of Yemen and Saudi Arabia and Libya in fighting human trafficking, and it's gonna fall to the tier 3, which means the worst fighting system, and prevention and protection of victims nationally.
Yes. Now, this is a murky, shadowy area, and statistics may be hard to get, but I think we identified a few minutes ago that there is probably some form of human trafficking in every country. Do we have any statistics on how many people are actually involved in human trafficking as far as victims, or do they have to cross the borders, the international borders, before we can really identify them? Because, as you mentioned, somebody might be a maid in somebody's house that you have no idea that she's being held. But do you have any figures on how many people are involved?
So what makes it hard to, you know, have exact statistics is that you don't really find out that this person has been trafficked across borders because they're under threat, or they don't even know that they've been trafficked until they reach the final destination. So if, let's say, a graduate girl would apply for a nanny job from Africa to go to Europe, she would sign papers, and then she would leave the country. And once she gets to Europe, to her destination, that's where she finds herself under the power of these people who would take her passport, who would take her, you know, papers, and then she would realize it. So the process of moving during that time, there's no one can identify it if the victim themselves cannot identify it. So that's also a problem. Basically, human trafficking is the third widespread global problem after, you know, smuggling of drugs and weapons. And the numbers identified are, of course, not exact, but what we know is 800,000 victims around globally who are trafficked transnationally across borders, but we don't have statistics about internally, which is a far bigger number in every country.
Logically, it would be. That would be a much bigger number. How do we help identify people who are being trafficked? Are there certain warning signs? Do some of the victims try to get the word out quietly, or maybe not so quietly, that they're being held against their will? Are there certain things we can look for with people whom we may come into contact with not on a daily basis, but periodically at the supermarket or in a department store or on the bus or something like that?
So basically, I think there should be more awareness about the topic. People should learn more about it. And there should be trainings for officials, for people who work in the health service and hospitals, because they get into first contact with victims. Also gas stations on the highways where victims can be trafficked in trucks coming from, moving from one state to another or from another country. So, yeah, victims can give signs, but they might be afraid to even give these signs. And a lot of victims don't identify themselves as victims. They don't know what's going on. They don't have the notion that they are victims of this. They just think that, I am poor, I'm uneducated, I'm young, maybe this is how life goes. Mm-hmm. So it's the power, and the power is in the hands of people who deal with the victims. They have to try to reach out to them and to have, to make them feel comfortable to talk about it, to ask them, and of course check for any red flags. If the person cannot give their own identification cards, they cannot give their own passports, that means there is something going on.
Mm-hmm. Would certain industries have perhaps better access or have a better early warning system about this? For example, I'm thinking of emergency rooms or hospitals where people may have to come in for some type of healthcare service, or maybe even school teachers who may have children in their classes whose parents or mother may be held against their will. Are there certain frontline industries, say in the United States or any place, any country of the world, where they should be on the alert to be watching for this?
What do you mean by hotline alerts?
Well, frontline. A frontline agency like a hospital. For example, if somebody had to bring a maid who had injured herself to the hospital, is there some way possibly that they should be watching to see if this woman perhaps did not have a passport, didn't have documentation, or something like that?
Yeah, so that's what I said. It's the nurses, it's the doctors, mm-hmm. It's the people who get in touch with the victims. They don't know they're victims, they just treat them as regular patients, and then if the victim shows inability of having control over themselves, over their lives, over their decisions, that's when they realize. But the problem is there's no training for this purpose. Mm-hmm. A lot of hospitals and a lot of people who work in the health service don't know this. That's why a lot of victims can pass by and they don't even realize them.
Mm-hmm. It certainly would happen that way, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Is there something, I know public awareness is so critically important, mm-hmm. That we should learn more about this. I'm just curious, this is a very important topic. How did you decide to go into this? You're a journalist, uh-huh. And how did you decide to pick human trafficking? You've done a study on it. What motivated you to go into this area?
So many factors. First of all, I would say being a feminist makes me feel for other women. So when I see how women don't have power over their lives anywhere in the world or in the Arab world, it makes me feel that I have to do something about it. And then at the age of 18, I was looking for jobs in the United Kingdom to work as a nanny. And I applied for this online portal. And then I started receiving emails having the same answer, like, we will take care of all the legal documents, we will take care of everything, we just want you to come here as soon as possible to start working with our kids. But once I asked them to, have a Skype conversation with me, I would like to meet them online before I take such a decision, all the responses were the same. They were all, we are busy, we don't have time for this, so we just want you to come. So I started thinking there might be something weird, there's something, skeptical about this. It's not natural, it's not normal. So I read about it and I did some research, and from there I realized that that's how trafficking happens. Girls just are looking for jobs, looking for a better life anywhere, and that's how they end up in the hands of traffickers. Yeah.
So you could have been potentially trafficked. And
Yes.
you just said,
Yes.
well, I'll get a ticket, I'll get on the next flight from Tunis
Yeah.
to London or something like that. And you could have found yourself in that situation.
Yes, but the thing is that I'm privileged because I'm educated. Other women in different parts of the world don't have this privilege to have access to education, so they wouldn't have thought the same way, and they would just go with the brighter window that will take them to the better future.
We've talked about several aspects of human trafficking. Now, you've done a study on this. You've studied it for several years now. Are there other elements that we haven't talked about today that you'd like to bring out, other findings or significant items that we need to look at as far as what we need to think about with human trafficking?
I would like people to start thinking out of the box, start thinking that this might actually be my child, it can be my sister, it can be the servant who's working next house, or the person who's working in the field, because everyone is susceptible to being trafficked. This can, touch any person, because it includes threatening, and it includes fear, and it includes a lot of power. So I would like people to stop stigmatizing prostitution and look at it as, the worst thing that can happen, because the people who work in prostitution can actually be the victims. So just learn more about it, about the topic, and try to be open and understanding to what's going on, and keep an eye on everything, and on people that you have reaction with every day.
There are many sociologists and criminologists and people who work in the legal profession who feel that it would probably, in their opinion, be worthwhile to maybe legalize prostitution, because that would bring it out of the shadows to a large degree. You would have people who undergo health checks periodically. You would have people who pay taxes on money that they're not paying taxes on now. But was that something that you looked at, the legalization of prostitution, and how it might actually reduce human trafficking, or at least make it harder to traffic somebody?
It's a very controversial topic.
Oh, it is.
Even on the international level.
Yes.
Like the international organizations had very difficult time talking about this topic. So of course it has its pros and cons, but it differs, I think, from one country to another. It cannot just be the same because of the different circumstances. Germany and the Netherlands, they have legal prostitution. Personally, I think maybe, as you said, if prostitution is legalized, then the names of people who work in this industry will be known. So if something goes wrong, you would know who the convict would be. However, if it's illegal, there's no trace and no track of anyone. So I don't know. It's a controversial topic.
It will be going on for quite a while.
I know.
Exactly. Now you're on the brink of leaving Lexington, Kentucky and going back to Tunis. What are you planning to do to continue this dialogue and to help people better understand this problem?
I'm planning on starting a non-governmental organization to fight human trafficking, and to raise awareness and to work on pushing further the policies and the laws that have to be implemented to rescue more women and to save more lives and to give a better dignity and better life for other victims. That's what I'm planning to do.
It sounds like an excellent opportunity and a challenge, but one I'm sure that you will achieve very, very easily. And of course, you've had some really unique experiences. You were involved in the Arab Spring. You've focused your attention on this issue of human trafficking. And it's one that we, as you mentioned earlier, we do need to learn much more about it. We need to become more cognizant of it. We need to share the information with folks. I'm sure that most communities today have human trafficking commissions or human trafficking centers and that type of thing, task forces that people can tap into to learn much more about this. But it's a very important topic. But Racha Haffar, I want to thank you so very much.
Thank you.
For a very interesting
Thank you so
and
much.
a very informative program.
Thank you.
Again, I'd like to remind our viewers to go to www.globalconnectionstelevision.com to tap into some of our previous programs. Also, if you would like, you're welcome to download the program and to air it on any type of media outlet. at no cost. It's free of charge. It is a public service to help us better understand international issues. I'm Bill Miller. Thank you for joining us today on Global Connections Television.